All right. All right, well, thanks for making it out on the last day of KubeCon, y'all. I can't tell you how exhausted I am, so it has been a wild ride. This could be a lightning talk or a 40-minute workshop. Surprise, you're in for a ride. This talk was actually inspired by a recent talk that I heard of Tim Hawkins. I run the Bay Area Kubernetes meetup, and we did this little mini conference, and he decided to do a keynote and talk a little bit about the non-technical aspects of Kubernetes. This is not a technical vision talk. This is not a state of the project, like you've already heard on the main stage at KubeCon. If that's what you're expecting, no harm, no foul. You can totally leave now or zone out in your computer. I do want to give you a jargon warning. I did put intermediate on the schedule, and the only reason why I did that is because I know myself, and I also know this content, and there will be acronyms, and there will be some terms that I might fly through. I'm going to do my best with explaining some of those, but if I don't at the end, if we have time for questions, which I'm sure there will be, then feel free to ask. Cool. And I know that the folks in the back have asked to hold questions so that we can get a mic. All right, so let's start this journey. I brought a prop. This prop is actually really special because Sarah Novotny actually gave me this prop as she was a couple of days ago. This was from the first contributor celebration or the first birthday party. So 5 years and 9 KubeCons ago, the community that we know and love was born. A clever and impactful community strategist, Sarah Novotny, nurtured the community of YAML and Bash scripts that we know today. So, who makes up this community? 31,000 contributors. I'm sure you've heard this number before. Nikita and Lucas, I believe, during their keynote had this as well. You probably hear this often too. This really represents one of the largest open source contributor bases out there, and also depending on your definition of contributor. So how do we define ours? PR creators, issue filers, committers, reviewers. So, how many of you, by a raise of hands, have done one of those for Kubernetes? Awesome. Me too. Now, let's give everybody a round of applause for being awesome contributors. Yeah. So, I'm one of those contributors. My name is Pittman. I work at Google Cloud. I'm on the open source strategy team. I've been working on upstream Kubernetes for about 22 months now and having the time of my life. I co-chair the special interest group for contributor experience. We have a bunch of hooligans. Just kidding, they are the best SIG that we have, and I'm biased. We work on all things contributor documentation, GitHub and community infra automation and setup and maintenance, contributor events, mentoring and growth, and so much more. I also am on the Code of Conduct Committee, and as I mentioned before, I co-organize one of the largest Kubernetes meetups in the world in the Bay Area. So, at the time of filling out this CFP, I did want to give myself a pat on the back. I don't know if anybody saw it in the CFP, but in the CFP I said that we have 26,000 contributors at the time of writing this, and that I predicted that we would have at least 30 by the time I delivered the talk. So Miss Cleo, psychic over here, was on target. So I just had to point that out. So now let's break this huge 31,000 number down a bit to sort of show the funnel, because that's not necessarily the whole story. 3,000 of them are committers. What's the difference between a committer and a contributor? A committer is someone who made or authored a committer PR and pushed it up. These folks are generally called approvers in our owners files. Things get a little hairy here. But it's important to break these personas down, as many assume that everything's covered, meaning we don't need any new contributors. We don't need any current contributors to go to other SIGs. We don't need any more help, because any human that looks at a number of 31,000 people thinks, wow, y'all are good. And that is really far from the case, because as we'll progress forward, we'll totally see why. The image that you actually see behind you is the text from a GitHub page that we have that actually lists out all of the GitHub repositories that we have. And these committers and all of these contributors are spread across 192 repositories. So it's just a really, really vast landscape. So now that sort of puts some perspective on that 31,000 number. These contributors are spread across many regions. I attempted to do a pie chart, and it looked like a lot of slices of different colors, with the United States being the largest chunk. But this is our top 10 right now showing on the screen. So what groups do these contributors belong to? This diagram by Brian Grant shows the relationships between SIGs, working groups, committees, and things like that have all sprung to life over the last 2 years, as well as those have been here since the start. After 5 years, we have several new committees to help steer the project forward, most notably the steering committee that originally started as a bootstrap committee, graduated, had an election, and then has also had another election. This year, we're going to do the same song and dance, and every year go forward, we're going to keep going with elections. This year's election is actually super special because we have 12 members right now, and the committee is going to be reduced to 7. This is definitely a space to watch if you're interested in either A, running for steering committee, because we would definitely love to have you. These are the body of folks that help run our governance and set our policies. And then we also have a product security team and also a code of conduct committee that we're currently in process of building a charter for. We've also seen working groups spring to life and retire through these last 5 years, and I think people might get maybe nervous when they see, a working group getting decommissioned or retired, whatever word you choose, and that's really not the case. Working group, the whole entire purpose of a working group is to be temporary. It's to work across SIGs, just looking here, working across SIGs. And once the job is done, it's done, and then the SIG will absorb that work. So it's been really neat to see that kind of temporary work either get onloaded to SIGs or sometimes not. As the movement of leadership changes too between both of these SIGs and the working groups, the percentage of the change is getting wider and wider, meaning the new guard of folks are coming in and replacing some of our older folks that have been in some of these chair roles for a long time. So just some example of these changes this year alone. So we're in May, so we're almost halfway through the year. Just play with me here. And we've already had 14 changes. That brings things like chair training, tech lead training, making sure that they're up to speed, and that's a lot of work. So it's 14 if you want to think about personnel changes, like if you want to think about SIGs as departments in a business, and then those SIGs have, those departments have leaders and things like that. That's kind of how I think about it in my head from like just an organizational perspective. So it's really important, though, that we give these chairs the most support as possible so that they can grow their micro communities. And then also, another really, really cool thing that has just sprung to life as well is the addition of user groups. User groups is a space where users can come and work with folks in SIGs and give feedback and have a much more tailored feedback loop to their process. And it's not necessarily intended to be temporary, so it's not necessarily a working group, but it's something that will help, like I said, close feedback loops. So that's a lot of people. It's a lot of groups. Most of the time when we talk to new contributors, they're like, whoa, what's going on? So how do you get work done? It's a question I often hear, even from executives. They say, how is this happening? You all are crushing work. We do 4 releases a year, and we're just chugging out code. Well, mainly through subprojects. As we grow through the years, we're finessing our organization. And subprojects are owned by SIGs. And what subprojects are is identifying areas of the project that you own. So certain parts of the code base, certain parts of the doc base, et cetera. So like for instance, if you work in the engineering department at your employer, I'm sure there's 45 different mini engineering things within that department. It's very similar to that. So each one of those departments has different owners, and they work together. So this actually makes them move faster and work quicker. Last time I checked, I think cluster lifecycle, they have the highest with over 15 right now. I think like API machinery might be next or something. Yeah, so the cool part now is these subprojects get to meet independently, and then they just kind of report up into their SIGs. Again, because when we're chugging out so much work, I know from experience from the contributor experience SIG that when we have one big meeting, it's everything in one. So at least when we chunk out to sub-project meetings, it can get finessed and then roll up into a larger SIG meeting. Oh yes, I also anticipate much more sub-projects in the future and as we go through different code organization activities and things like that. So how these groups operate and make decisions has become much smoother through implementation of charters across the board. This is something that the steering committee worked super diligently with. They actually paired some of the committee members to SIG chairs to just kind of walk them along through this process. Again, some of our chairs are not trained at being chairs. So when you say fill out a charter, it's super important to give them templates and things like that. So the steering committee definitely did a really great job in making sure that everybody has a charter. And this is great for both new and current contributors who are confused and say, what the heck does this SIG do? Like, what do they own? That's what the charter is for. The charter has the responsibilities, the in-scope, the out-of-scope, pretty much everything you need to know. So if you are interested in getting involved, I tell folks to go to the community repo and look through the SIG directories in there for charters, and you can just, it's kind of like a little per review into what it is that they're about. And then current contributors use that too. Like I said, when they need to know, hey, I think I'm going to make a change to someone else's thing, or who do I need to talk to about something, that really helps map that for them. Also during the 1.14 release, I think that was called Kubernetes. Yeah, Kubernetes. The team implemented all KEPs for the first release cycle. KEPs, for those, I will explain KEPs. KEPs, for those that don't know, is Kubernetes enhancement proposals, very similar to Python enhancement proposals. They were pretty much modeled off of that. KEPs help us with defining features, additions, major removals of things, and just really major changes that could potentially be breaking or across SIG, et cetera, so that people have a wider view of them. And this has really, really, really improved the project, I think, by a lot. We have a lot to do in this area because not all SIGs are on the KEP train, and some are. And then we also have a lot of process and improvement to do around the tooling of them, as well as like deadline refinement and stuff like that. There's been quite a few conversations as of late around like deadlines for KEPs as it relates to code freeze and all the other awesome release deadlines. But go forward, KEPs will be the future. And so like if you ever want to know the stuff that's going into Kubernetes and get a kind of a grip on it or a handle, that's where you would look. We like to talk. That's definitely, I think, no stranger to anyone in this room, especially here at KubeCon, where my voice is almost going out right now. But we have several just contributor-focused channels, because when you look at Kubernetes as a whole, from the word community, right? Community means to us end user and contributor. So we have millions of channels for all of those things. Anything that you can hit, we have. But we do have quite a few contributor-focused channels, specifically the Kubernetes dev mailing list. And then also the Kubernetes blog. A lot of our contributors do read that. But yeah, actually going back to the point about the end users, the cool thing about our contributor base, specifically in this open source project, is that I might say, I'm going to throw out a number of 99% of them are most likely end users. So they have that relationship already. So even if they are reading end user channels, they might still be able to pick up on some of that contributor information. But Slack is definitely our sort of lifeline artery of the contributor project as far as getting work done. So when people always, like I know I said subprojects before, when people are, oh, well, how do you get work done? And through subprojects, sure, that's accurate. But honestly, I really think we get work done because of the real-time communication that we have compared to other open source projects. This is both a benefit and a detriment. Because running open source communities with proprietary tools is not wonderful. And it's important to make sure that you get those things right. Those things being moderation and communication policies and things along those lines. But we did a poll, we did a contributor experience survey last year. 82% of the respondents said that Slack was useful. Don't get me wrong, I bet you the other remaining were, IRC, and we have tons of those folks who are still begging for us to take 70,000 people on Slack and do our own IRC server. So bless them. On the topic of emojis and Slack, because of course that's why we use Slack, is the emojis. I did an emoji talk at the last KubeCon, and I actually wanted to use this slide here because it's really cool. This was an analysis of the "this is fine" dog emoji as it relates to all the channels. And it actually peaks during release periods, most notably in the following channels: cluster lifecycle, contributor experience, release testing, and testing ops. Wonder why. Scaling's hard. Something I feel like I've had to learn painfully throughout the years is removing myself or a manual process retroactively can be super difficult. And I think we see that a lot in Kubernetes today, where we have set up these community processes and things like that, and then we're trying to back them out and go, oh no, we need to automate this, and then without breaking everything. So that is definitely hard. But we have some other scaling challenges that I kind of wanted to bring up today outside of, probably what everybody thinks of, like mailing lists, scaling challenges, and things like that. One, scaling expectations. That is like the first thing I wanted to say because I really think it blends in with everything else. The bar seems to be a lot higher for both new and current contributor expectations, especially after being in open source for quite a while and watching the evolution of what people expect. I mean, if you ask any one open source developer what they expect today, as a maintainer or as a contributor, I think you're going to get different responses across the board. But I think I've boiled some things down in our community based off of surveys, focus groups, what people yell at us about, and issues, and what they love us about. So, respect. That's the expectation. People are coming to this table, and they at least expect respect. They want to be communicated with. If something's not going right, they want to know. If you are busy and not going to be able to merge PRs, they want to know. If you're going to be out for 2 weeks and can't do something, they want to know. So I think respect boils down to, in that example, just making sure you're communicating with teams of maintainers and whoever of your status, both on the project and like temporary bouts of being off the project. Contributors who submit features are expected to stick around for over a year because of the GA process. That's not necessarily an expectation that I think a lot of contributors go in with when they're submitting a feature. Usually when they submit a feature, it's just super excited. I'm either fixing something or making something better, and short-term hazy, sparkly eyes says, sure, I can maintain this for a whole year. Well, open source sometimes is a second job unless you're getting paid for it full time, like luckily I am. But that's an expectation that we need to manage. So a lot of people expect mentoring and onboarding paths. So it's really important that we ask, we listen, we be explicit with both new and current contributors as much as possible. I tell all of our chairs, I tell our tech leads, if you feel like you communicated something, you should probably do it 3 more times. There's that many people in the project now that you absolutely have to overly communicate. Many of them want to climb the ladder. So that's an expectation that I just mentioned before. This is, again, another thing from our contributor experience survey. 81% of them said yes, they're going to climb the ladder. What's the ladder? Reviewer, approver, owner, things like that. So, and then over here you can also see 42% said they want mentorship. Kubernetes is not a for-profit business, it's an open source project. So for us to ask maintainers to do one-on-one mentoring for 31,000 people, that's gonna get a little sticky. Scaling empathy. I recently read Rust's blog on scaling empathy. Did anybody else read that? So good. Really, really good, y'all. So you should definitely check it out. It so resonated with me because it was talking about how the hardest part about working in open source is working in the open, and how building features and things like that can be challenging when you're putting your heart and soul into it and then someone comes and just cuts it up. So building empathy is super hard, and figuring out how to scale that is even harder. That's something that we should and need to work on and continue to work on in the future. I mean, humans are going to human, and they're going to give very real emotions in public, and figuring out how to deal with that is the challenge. The next scaling issue is building trust. This is where this is one of the biggest difficulties that we have with getting more people into owners' files. One of the major components of building trust is following through with what you do. This is open source. How many people here have had someone not follow through with what they were going to do? Every day, right? So as a maintainer of an open source project, how can you possibly build trust with 31,000 contributors in an empathetic environment and grow them and build trust? Saying no. Scaling saying no is really hard because saying no, you're perceived as a blocker, you're perceived as not collaborative. But again, 31,000 contributors, and every day folks knocking on our door asking us to help them with their journey to contribute or journey to be a better reviewer or wanting to be an approver. With a project this size, it's really important to know your limits. Burnout's a thing. Mental health, again, going back to this might be a second job for you. Communicating expectations, again, helps with this if you find contributors are looking for quick turnarounds that aren't feasible. So what should we focus on? Scalable mentoring. I preach about this. I think I'm looking at around the room, and I think half of you have heard at least 1 hour tirade of mine on this. Building roles and teams. Is everybody here familiar with the Kubernetes release team? They have a lead, and then they have shadows. Why can't we do that for everything? That is natural doing by learning. So we are. So many of our SIGs right now are doing that. In contributor experience, we're setting up a marketing team. Not like KubeCon, I'm talking about marketing contributors and their stories and putting humans behind it on blogs. Live code reviews, API reviews, and triage videos on YouTube as a how-to video. That's scalable. Then when people say, oh, I don't know how to triage your issues, you say, oh, here's this video. And then now 50 people understand how to triage your issues. We also do meet our contributors now. It's a monthly series on YouTube that we live stream every first Wednesday, 2 sessions, and we have between 3 and 6 contributors on the line, and we ask questions, or we answer questions from current contributors and a lot of new contributors as well about their journey through the process and things that they would ask a normal mentor in a one-on-one relationship without that time burden. I get mostly direct messages because people want to be anonymous. There are plenty of people in our community that are still confused by what a subproject is. So it's important that we get those things out in that kind of a scalable way. Also, KubeCon. We ran, actually we have another session this afternoon for speed mentoring, where we put people in little pods, not one-on-one, and do mentoring in pods and do this sort of round the circle, and we can onboard hundreds of people. This is a Timism, Tim Hawkinism, slowing down and being more careful. Tons of release process conversations going on. As I mentioned, we're still pumping releases out every 4 months. Is that something we want to do? There's a long-term, there's an LTS working group also that sprung up. So these conversations are live and ongoing. This also means coding less and reviewing more, especially for our reviewers and approvers who still code a ton. And then refining and scaling processes. Something else that we should really focus on is rewards, recognitions, and incentives. As the new guard rolls through, they aren't incentivized the way that others are in the past. I'm sure many folks in here know other people who have contributed to open source for quite a long time. And this is especially true in these chop wood, carry water roles, when there's not too much incentive, when you don't have code ownership, when you don't have doc ownership. Like, what is the real incentive to be a chair here? I might not be able to tell you that. But these are things like project management, being a facilitator, and things along those lines. But if we can think about how to maybe create roles and create other incentives, maybe learning incentives, then maybe this could help us out. And that's it. Thank you so much to all of our contributors. You all are amazing, amazing humans. We're blazing the trail on so many issues. When people say to me, oh, well, tell me what other Slack community has 70,000 people in it. Who can we turn to look at this? I say we are those people. We have one of the largest Slack channels in the world. So who do we look to when we need this guidance? There is no guidance. We are making that guidance. Other projects at this point come to me for guidance. And I say, no, I want to learn from you. So that's it for me. Any questions? I think I'm running late too. Okay.
So I would like to be a contributor. So I'm not right now, besides putting in a couple of little bugs for documentation. Mm-hmm. I've got an idea for Kubernetes that's, at least for the project, that isn't being touched on at all, mm-hmm. which would be open source, vendor neutral training. But there isn't any right now. So where would I go to begin that journey?
So vendor neutral open source training. So like, that would probably be CNCF. I would think that would be more on that side. What can you dig a little bit more into the training?
For example, so each vendor has their own way of installing, so that's fine. Mm-hmm. But from after installing, how do I use kubectl? Now I can go to the docs and I can probably get some out of it, but there's no training course telling me how to use kubectl. You might find some random YouTube videos from 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to find anything up to date. You're not going to find anything open source.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think you should go. To SIGs. Like, so for instance, if it's kubectl, you should go to SIG CLI and say, hey, I'd love to make some videos for y'all. Because again, that's some of the scalable mentoring stuff. And I've told some of our chairs and tech leads to listen to other contributors who might want to be interested in doing those kinds of videos. And we can post them to YouTube on the community channel if they are indeed vendor neutral. I mean, contributor, and you can also come to Contributor Experience, my SIG, for that stuff. In the community repo right now, it says Kubernetes/community. That's the community repo. There's an issue that talks about code-based tours and videos and stuff like that. If you want to comment on there, we can stay in touch.
As far as end user training goes, the CNCF does have free training through, I think it's not Udacity, but through one of them. The other one. EDX. And there is actually other stuff too in the cncf.io/presentations that does have at least links to some other training stuff that is, I know, free and open.
The docs is like a tutorial framework thing.
Yeah.
You can like screencast that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the doc space you have a Katacoda courses that are open source, are in the GitHub, you can make pull requests. And for example, I run the meetup here in Barcelona from the Cloud Native Foundation, and we run study jams each month, open to everyone, and all the content we make is published in GitHub, so you can like check the content, get the slides, use them, change them. It's open source, so we can follow and I can show you all the material we are making, and you can use them.
I think we are like super late. Yeah. Thanks, y'all. I didn't even have a contact slide, like a dummy. If you need me, reach out to me on Contributor Experience Slack or the Contributor Experience mailing list, and we'll stay in touch.